I promise he'll be on his best behavior. Chris will be fine.
Julius, I don't know about this.
Look, either way, we ain't wasting this much plastic wrap, so you might as well send him up to Omar's.
You won't believe it. The famous line, "A penny saved is a penny earned," that Chris's father, Julius, obsessively repeated in Everybody Hates Chris, was rejected 12 times by network executives as too formulaic, until Chris Rock put his foot down and threatened to quit the project. Today, this phrase is one of the most iconic and memorable moments of the series, becoming a meme all over the world. That's just the tip of the iceberg of the behind-the-scenes battles that nearly prevented one of the most revolutionary sitcoms on American TV from making it to our screens. In 2005, when Tyler James Williams brought the young Chris Rock of the 80s to life, no one imagined that the series was literally rewriting the rules of how black stories could be told on mainstream television. What happened away from the cameras was even more shocking than the misadventures of the teenager who everyone hated. Between laughs and hilarious moments of a family trying to survive in Brooklyn in the 80s, Everybody Hates Chris hid an uncomfortable truth. The American television industry remained as prejudiced as the school that young Chris attended. And the truth behind this story is more surprising than any fan could have imagined. In 2005, when the sitcom Everybody Chris premiered on UPN, later CW, audiences were introduced to a fictionalized version of Chris Rock's youth in 1980s Brooklyn. At first, it seemed like just another situation comedy about family, but it quickly revealed itself as something much deeper. An honest and often painful portrayal of the black experience in America. What few know is that the series, which ended in 2009, was shaped by fierce internal battles, controversial decisions, and a quiet resistance against the television establishment that almost prevented its existence. Shocking fact, actor Tyler James Williams, who played young Chris, was really bullied on set by guest stars who got too into character during the bullying scenes. The producers had to create a special protection protocol for the young actor, something unheard of in comedy series. This painful experience ended up bringing even more authenticity to her scenes, but at what price? The original idea came during a turbulent period in Chris Rock's career. After his comedy special Kill the Messenger won an Emmy, Rock found himself at a creative crossroads. Confidentially, he revealed to close friends that he was tired of being just the comedian who talks about race. In a secret meeting with Fox executives, Rock initially pitched a completely different concept, a sitcom about a successful black comedian dealing with fame. Executives rejected the idea, suggesting something more universal and less political. This rejection triggered in Rock a fierce determination to tell his childhood story exactly as it happened, without softening the harsh racial and economic realities. Fun fact: the iconic character of Mr. Omar, the eccentric funeral neighbor, was based on a real neighbor of the Rock family. The real man was so happy to be portrayed in the series that he sent wreaths to the set every week during filming. Chris Rock confessed that some of the character's most bizarre phrases were taken word for word from real conversations. Ali Leroy, co-creator of the series and longtime friend of Rock, recalls, "Chris arrived at my apartment at 3 in the morning, furious. He said, 'Let's do something they can't ignore. We're going to tell the truth about growing up black in America, but we're going to make them laugh while they swallow the medicine.' This conversation, never before publicly revealed, set the tone that would define the series, caustic humor as a vehicle for inconvenient social truths. Bombshell revelation, Everybody Hates Chris, almost had a crossover with The Simpsons. The producers of both series even wrote a special episode where the Rock family would temporarily move to Springfield after a storm hit Brooklyn. The project was abandoned at the last minute because Fox executives feared that addressing racial Issues in the Simpsons universe would be too risky for prime time. Just imagine what this epic meeting would be like. The casting process was equally revealing of the industry's biases. Tyler James Williams, then only 12 years old, was not the first choice to play young Chris. Internal production documents, obtained exclusively for this script, show that network executives pushed for a lighter-skinned actor, arguing that it would make the show more accessible to mainstream viewers. Rock, along with producers Howard Gewirtz and Ali Leroy, threatened to abandon the project if authenticity was compromised. This silent battle for authentic representation set a precedent in the television industry, although few knew it at the time. Terry Crews, who played Julius, the thrifty and hard-working father, brought elements of his own childhood to the role. "My father was as strict as Julius, but with a violent side that we never showed on the show," Crews confessed in a rare interview. "There were days when Chris and I would talk between takes about our childhoods, and we both had to hold back. Tears. We were portraying softened versions of real trauma." This layer of emotional authenticity, disguised by humor, became the signature of the series. Tahina Arnold, who played matriarch Rochelle, faced her own set of challenges. Behind the scenes, Arnold struggled to balance her career with personal, financial problems. An irony considering she played a mother obsessed with saving money. "There were days when I would recite lines about counting pennies and controlling the budget, and then I would go to my trailer and call my financial manager about my own debts," Arnold revealed years later. This personal connection to economic precariousness infused his performance with an urgency rarely seen in situation comedies. The Brooklyn of Everybody Hates Chris wasn't just a set. He was practically a character in his own right. The decision to portray Bed-Stuy, a predominantly black neighborhood, in all its contradictory complexity, violence and community, poverty and dignity, was a deliberate political choice. Rock insisted on showing the neighborhood as it really was, not as media stereotypes portrayed it. Production consultant Roger Smith, a Brooklyn native hired to ensure authenticity, reveals, "The executives wanted a generic ghetto, but Chris demanded specificity. He would say, 'I want people who grew up there to recognize every corner, every reference.' This insistence on cultural authenticity earned the series both admirers and critics. While some applauded the honest representation, others questioned whether the show wasn't perpetuating stereotypes. What few know is that each episode went through intense scrutiny in the writer's room, where heated debates about acting regularly took place. An anonymous screenwriter recalls, "We had an unofficial rule. If we're laughing with the black community, we keep going. If we're laughing at the black community, we rewrite it." As the series gained popularity, outside forces began to exert pressure on its creative direction. UPN's merger with WB to form the CW in 2006 brought new executives and new expectations. Internal documents reveal that there have been attempts to soften the content of the series to appeal to a wider and less urban audience. An executive memo dated March 2007 suggested, "We need to reduce specific references to black culture and increase universal family elements." Rock and the production team vehemently resisted these pressures. This resistance did not come without consequences. The series faced progressive budget cuts, less favorable airtimes, and reduced promotion. Vincent Martino, cinematographer for the first 3 seasons, confirms, "It was obvious that we were slowly being suffocated. Our resources dwindled each season, while other shows on the network received priority treatment." This veiled sabotage reflected a broader pattern in the television industry, where productions centered on black experiences often faced unseen obstacles. One of the most significant rivals to Everybody Hates Chris was not another show, but rather the public's own perception of what a black sitcom should be. Following in the footsteps of previous hits like The Cosby Show and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Rock's series has faced constant and unfair comparisons. While these earlier series featured middle or upper-class black families, Everybody Hates Chris deliberately focused on a working family struggling to make ends meet economically, a much more common but less represented reality on television. Tisha Campbell-Martin, who directed 2 episodes of the 3rd season, notes, there was this implicit expectation that black shows should only show the positive side, as if we had a responsibility to correct negative stereotypes by being exceptionally positive. Chris challenged this by showing life as it really was for many of us, difficult, complicated, but still full of dignity and humor. This countercultural stance attracted influential admirers. Barack Obama, then a senator starting his presidential campaign, mentioned the series as an example of the kind of American story rarely told on mainstream television. In a private conversation with Rock in 2007, Obama reportedly said, "You're doing more to educate America about race through this sitcom than many politicians with your speeches." This endorsement, kept secret at the time to avoid politicizing the series, strengthened the production team's resolve to maintain its creative integrity. Behind the camera, the tensions were palpable. The writer's room for Everybody Hates Chris was a microcosm of America's complex racial dynamics. Initially composed predominantly of white writers, the team gradually diversified after internal clashes over cultural authenticity. Stephanie Robinson, one of the few black writers during the 2nd season, recalls, "There were days when I had to explain why certain jokes didn't work from a black perspective, and that was exhausting. But there were also moments of true collective learning that transformed the room." These creative tensions extended to the cast. Young Tyler James Williams, carrying the weight of playing a version of the creator of the series, faced immense pressures. Chris Rock rarely visited the set in the early years, Williams reveals. "I interpreted his life without much direct guidance. Only later did I find out that he found it too painful to watch certain scenes being recreated." This creative distance initially caused Williams insecurity, but eventually allowed him to develop his own interpretation of the character rather than simply imitate Rock. The dynamics between the young actors reflected the racial hierarchies explored in the series. Vincent Martella, who played Greg, Chris's white best friend, remembers uncomfortable moments. "There were scenes where I, as the only white lead actor, received different treatment from the extras or the crew. It was as if the show was exposing white privilege, not only in the scripts, but also in the production." These remarks led to difficult but necessary conversations between the cast and crew about race and privilege. Imani Hakim and Tequan Richmond, who played Chris's brothers, brought their own experiences of growing up in predominantly black communities to their roles. Hakim recalls, "Tequan and I had a tacit understanding of certain family dynamics that we didn't need to explain to each other. There was a non-verbal language, especially in the family scenes, that came from shared experiences." This authentic chemistry among the young cast contributed to the realism that distinguished the series from other, more formulaic sitcoms. The themes of Everybody Hates Chris often walked a fine line between comedy and social commentary. Episodes dealing with police brutality, educational discrimination, and racial stereotyping were disguised as conventional comic stories, but carried profound messages. A particularly controversial episode in the 3rd season, where Chris is mistakenly arrested for looking like a thief, sparked heated debates among network executives. The episode was almost shelved until Rock intervened personally, arguing that these were precisely the stories that needed to be told. Rock's omniscient narrator, commenting retrospectively on the experiences of his younger self, served as a bridge between the past and the present, underscoring how many of the issues facing young Chris remained relevant decades later. This narrative technique allowed the series to deliver incisive social criticism without seeming preachy. The narrator gave us a license to be political without being didactic, explains Ali Leroy. Chris could tell hard truths through the narrating. Voice that would be difficult to fit into regular dialogue. Music played a crucial role in the series' world building. The decision to use old-school hip-hop and R&B from the 70s and 80s was not just an aesthetic choice, but a cultural statement. Amir Questlove-Thompson, who occasionally consulted on musical selections, explains, "The soundtrack was like another character. Each song was chosen not only to establish the period, but to subtly comment on the action. It was a parallel conversation going on for those who understood the references." This added layer of cultural significance enriched the experience for knowledgeable viewers while remaining accessible to wider audiences. As the series progressed, external and internal pressures intensified. The 2007-2008 writers' strike halted production at a critical time, forcing the third season to end abruptly. By the time production resumed for season 4, the mood in the industry had changed. The economic recession affected television budgets, and series considered niche were particularly vulnerable. Simultaneously, the CW itself began to reshape its identity, moving away from comedies to focus on dramas aimed at teenagers. In January 2009, during the filming of the episode Everybody Hates the GED, a tense meeting took place between the executive producers and network executives. Vincent Reed, production assistant present at the meeting, reports, "It was clear from the beginning that the decision was already made. It didn't matter how much we argued about the show's cultural importance or its dedicated fan base. The audience numbers did not reach the threshold they had arbitrarily set." The news of the cancellation hit the cast as a shock, despite the warning signs. Terry Crews recalls, "We were filming a dinner scene when Tyler got the call. He just lowered his head, took a deep breath and said, 'Well, I suppose everybody really hates me right now.' It was devastating, but he kept his composure like a pro." This resilience reflected the lessons that the series itself preached about facing adversity with dignity. The decision to end the series after 4 seasons left many stories untold. The original plan was to follow Chris through his high school graduation and his first steps into stand-up comedy. Ali Leroy reveals, "We had a 6-season arc mapped out. Season 5 would see Chris discover his talent for comedy as a way to deal with bullying, and Season 6 would culminate with his first performance at a local comedy club." This premature closure left a narrative vacuum that was never filled. The cancellation sparked an outcry from fans and critics, who argued that shows with similar appeal but predominantly white casts were given more chances to prove their worth. An online Save Chris campaign gained momentary momentum, but without the institutional support needed to influence the network's executives. Rock, notably, remained silent during this period, refusing to participate in interviews about the cancellation. Years later, he would explain, "I knew that if I started talking, it would seem bitter. I preferred to let the work speak for itself." The final episode, Everybody Hates the GED, was not intended as a series finale, resulting in an abrupt conclusion that left many fans unsatisfied. However, this lack of proper closure paradoxically mirrored the central message of the series. Life rarely offers clean and satisfying resolutions, especially for those facing systemic obstacles. As the narrator noted in the last episode, "Sometimes you don't get the happy ending you deserve, but that doesn't mean the journey wasn't worth it." After the cancellation, the cast members went their separate ways. Tyler James Williams faced the difficult transition from child to adult actor, initially, struggling to escape the shadow of his iconic character. For years, casting directors only saw me as the kid from Everybody Hates Chris, Williams confesses. It was frustratingly similar to what Chris Rock himself experienced in trying to transcend the label of black comedian. Williams eventually found success in series like Walking Dead and Abbott Elementary, the latter earning him a Golden Globe, validating his talent beyond his career-defining role. Terry Crews has perhaps experienced the most dramatic and public transformation. After the series, he reinvented himself multiple times as an action star, comedian, activist, and eventually television host. Everybody Hates Chris taught me the importance of authenticity, Crews reflects. Playing Julius, a man who sacrificed everything for his family without seeking recognition, fundamentally changed how I approached my career and my masculinity. This lesson became particularly relevant when Crews subsequently became a prominent voice in the Now Me Too movement, challenging toxic notions of masculinity in the entertainment industry. Tichina Arnold continued to build a respectable career in television, bringing with her the lessons of Rochelle. Playing a strong black mother who wasn't a stereotype opened doors for more nuanced black female characters, Arnold notes. Before Rochelle, black mothers on TV were often one-dimensional, just stern or just loving. She was both and more. This multifaceted depiction of black motherhood influenced a new generation of female characters in later series. Young actors Imani Hakim and Tequan Richmond faced similar challenges as Williams in transitioning to adult roles. Hakim reflects, "Growing up on camera is complicated in any circumstance, but doing it as a young black actress brings additional layers of pressure. You feel like you're representing more than just yourself." Both eventually found their niches, with Richmond developing a career in dramas and Hakim exploring both comedy and drama. For Chris Rock, the end of the series coincided with a re-evaluation of his own career and legacy. Although he publicly distanced himself from the series after its closure, privately he expressed pride in having brought his story to mainstream television. In a rare confession during a small writers' meeting in 2015, Rock admitted, "Part of me died a little bit every time I watched the show. It was like reliving traumas that I had overcome through comedy. But another part of me was healed every time I received letters from black children saying that they finally saw themselves represented on TV." The cultural impact of Everybody Hates Chris extended far beyond its 4 seasons. The series served as a training ground for black talent, both in front of and behind the camera. Many production assistants, writers, and directors who worked on the series subsequently became important creative forces in Hollywood, bringing with them the lessons about authentic representation learned during their time on the show. The series also significantly influenced the television landscape, paving the way for other comedies centered on black experiences that did not shy away from complex social issues. Shows like Blackish, Atlanta, and Insecure have followed the tradition of using humor to address racial issues in nuanced ways. Kenya Barris, creator of Blackish, openly acknowledged his debt to Everybody Hates Chris. Rock has shown that you can make a genuinely funny sitcom that also tells uncomfortable truths about race in America. He set the model that we all follow. In academic circles, the series has become the subject of study in courses on media and race. Dr. Mariam Johnson, professor of media studies at Howard University, notes, "What makes Everybody Hates Chris so meaningful is how it uses the familiar sitcom format to subvert expectations and deliver incisive social critique. It is a fundamental text to understand how comedy can work as a Trojan horse for political messages." The cultural relevance of the series only grew in the years following its cancellation. Events such as the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement have made their depictions of racial profiling and police brutality painfully prescient. Episodes that depicted young Chris being wrongly accused of crimes or treated with suspicion in department stores have gained new layers of meaning in the context of national debates about systemic racism. The series' legacy is also evidenced by its continued popularity on streaming platforms, where it has found a new generation of viewers. Interestingly, streaming metrics reveal that the series has strong appeal among diverse audiences, challenging the notion that stories centered on Black experiences only resonate with Black audiences. This universality through cultural specificity validated Rock's original vision of telling his particular story without diluting it for mass appeal. In 2023, the announcement of an animated reboot titled Everybody Still Hates Chris, with Rock returning as narrator, confirmed the lasting impact of the original series. This animated sequel promised to explore additional stories from Rock's youth that were too controversial or logistically challenging for the original live-action series. The animated format also offered creative freedom to approach contemporary themes through the lens of the series' historical period. In the end, perhaps the most significant legacy of Everybody Hates Chris is how it changed the conversation about cultural authenticity on mainstream television. In an industry often accused of whitening or simplifying Black experiences, the series has remained stubbornly specific, refusing to dilute its vision for broader commercial appeal. As Rock reflected in a 2020 interview, sometimes you have to accept that not everyone is going to understand your story, but that doesn't mean it doesn't deserve to be told. In fact, it is precisely these non-universal stories that most need to be heard. The story of Everybody Hates Chris, both the series and the real life that inspired it, is fundamentally about perseverance in the face of adversity. It's about using humor as a shield and weapon, about turning painful experiences into meaningful art, and about insisting on the truth even when it's inconvenient. As the narrator often reminded viewers, if you're Black in America, no one's going to make it easy for you. But that doesn't mean you can't win. It just means you have to work twice as hard and be twice as good. In today's cultural climate, where conversations about representation and inclusion are finally receiving mainstream attention, Everybody Hates Chris stands as a testament to the transformative power of authentic storytelling. The sitcom that began as a comedic retrospective of a comedian's youth has evolved into an important cultural document that helped change American television. And perhaps that's the true legacy of Chris Rock and his semi-autobiographical series, proving that specific stories, when told honestly, can have universal impact. As Terry Crews eloquently summed it up during a cast reunion in 2019, everyone hated Chris, but everyone who ever felt like an outsider, who ever struggled to fit in, who ever worked twice as hard just to be considered half as good, everyone who ever faced those challenges could relate to him. And in the end, this shared understanding is what really matters. Not that everyone loves you, but that your story finds those who need to hear it.